the Greenskins. Vast in their numbers, capable of unparalleled savagery, they know— Whoa! Grimgore?
Shut up, you mate! Listen here, you kids. If you want to know how to run with the Greenskin boys, I'll tell ya. You grab the biggest chopper you can carry and swing it at anything but a grain, and you don't stop until it stops squirming.
So we'll begin with the primary positives and negatives of the Greenskin forces. The first thing that you'll find when playing as the Greenskins is that numbers can be your biggest advantage. Capable of fielding huge armies for small prices, the Greenskins have a huge advantage when it comes to outnumbering and outflanking their opponents. With this in mind, the Greenskins excel at being a very offensive faction. Charging their opponent down and trying to overrun them as quickly as possible, maximising the amount of damage output they produce, is a very strong tactic for the Greenskins. They're capable of achieving large amounts of damage in short spaces of time. The reason they need to act fast though is not only a lack of leadership, but also a lack of armour. A combination of things mean that the Greenskins aren't great at sticking around in a prolonged fight. So while they can deal damage very quickly, they can also take damage very quickly as well. But somewhere in the middle of all this Greenskin routing, you will find that they are quite resilient. They very often come back to the fight after they've routed, so if you see a Greenskin army running for the hills, don't count them out just yet. Even if they keep running away, they will usually keep coming back numerous times, seemingly more so than other factions. The last thing you'll find about the Greenskins is that their roster is kind of average. They have many different options in their roster, which is a good thing, but they don't really excel in any one area of their army. They've got some good infantry, they've got some good cavalry, but they're not the best in any one place like most other factions. The Elves have the best missiles, Bretonnia have the best horses, Empire have the best artillery, the Greenskins don't have the best anything, but that's part of their charm. Their massive options and massive numbers are what give the Greenskins their advantages. So learn and understand these traits to best wield the Greenskins. Now let's look at how all that affects them in battle. So I'm going to go ahead and say that the Greenskins' main playstyle is that of a rush army. Charging in fast and aggressive, lots of flanking, little messing about with skirmishing, just getting into everything as quickly as possible and trying to do that damage in a short space of time. The reason this is generally best is because of the low leadership and low armour. They can't tank out a lot of damage like other factions. They can't sit there and take loads of artillery fire or missiles because they will waver and run away pretty damn quick. But like I said, they have lots of options in their roster, so if they want to play a balanced or defensive game, they can do. If they're at an artillery disadvantage though, this may not be the best idea. But when the main battle does start to kick into play though, be sure to act fast. This ties in to making good use of your numbers advantage should you choose to bring one. The idea is that most of the factions have to spend a lot of money in a certain area to get the most out of their faction. This means overall they'll have a smaller army and a lot less troops, whereas the Greenskins are more of a quantity over quality type army. For example, where the vampires could bring 1 unit of Blood Knights at 1700 funds, the Greenskins could bring 2 units of Orc Ball Boy Biggins for just over the same price. Those 2 units may be able to beat the Blood Knights, but they definitely wouldn't be able to beat them one-on-one. So that's how the quantity over quality situation comes into play. But what does this numbers advantage really mean for the Greenskins? Well, if you have considerably superior numbers over your enemy, it means your army can be a lot wider than theirs is. This makes flanking the enemy a hell of a lot easier as they simply won't have enough troops to get in your way. So you'll be able to run around the flanks, get in behind them, envelop them, and savagely murder anything you find back there, and cause a ton of leadership penalties. And while the Greenskins will do very well with a lot of flanking and enveloping, they can also be fantastic at destroying enemy front lines. Your primary cheaper frontline Orc Boys may not be the best unit in the world, but with some support and some buffs, they can smash their way through a lot of different frontline types. You can support them with Night Goblins to help reduce the enemy stats, you could bring in nasty Skulkers if you've got some heavily armoured enemies, or you could just switch around the quality quantity thing and bring a frontline of Black Orcs. You'll have an extremely strong frontline which will brutalise most other frontlines. But of course then, you've moved into the quality over quantity thing, so your army is going to be smaller because you spent so much on Black Orcs. But whichever frontline you choose to bring, buffs and magic are going to be your secret weapon. Most of your lords or heroes have the WAAAAAGGGH ability or Here We Go spell. This gives the units in range plus 58 melee attack. That is an absolutely disgusting amount of melee attack which will help your frontline absolutely slaughter the enemies. I'll talk about this more later on. It's also worth noting that the Big War and Little War spellbooks are both pretty offensive, as well as the Law of Death that WAAAAAGGGH has. They're really designed for dealing out damage more than protecting their own troops. Now one thing the Greenskins do have to look out for though is large units. Monsters and cavalry can be a problem for the Greenskins. They don't have a great deal of anti-large units. Of course, Orc Big Uns are the primary one. You have some cavalry that has a bonus versus large, but they're a bit fragile, so they're not the most effective. Missiles can be useful though, but overall it's difficult for the Greenskins to field a lot of anti-large units. Given most units low leadership, they won't be able to stick around long enough to stand up to different monsters and things. So some special attention should probably be given to large units to try and take them down first. The Greenskins also have no flying units other than a couple of Lord mounts. So this air inferiority means that they do have to be careful of flying units, especially if you do decide to bring your Lord on a flying mount. If you're facing someone with strong flying units like Bretonnia or the Elves, you probably want to leave your Lord off a mount in case he gets outnumbered in the air and can't escape and gets his frickin' head kicked off. The Greenskins do have some okay missile units though that can help keep those flyers at bay. So these I believe are the most notable strategic points about the Greenskin army. There's a lot of different ways to play, a lot of different builds, a lot of different playstyles, but they're all going to stem from these kind of concepts. Learn them, understand them, wield them. Now for a few important points to make. As I scroll across these units, keep an eye on the melee defense. What you'll find is that all these units have a low to average melee defense. This is why the Greenskins can take a lot of damage quite quickly. Melee defense is the stat that governs the unit's chance to dodge an attack. So in true Orc fashion, they don't really care about getting out of the way of attacks, they'll just tank it and keep fighting anyway. Couple that with the low leadership and low armour, and you've got an army that isn't going to stick around too long. Of course we already know this, but I think it's important to understand why this happens, so that's why I'm telling you this. This lack of staying power though is a real problem for Greenskin front lines. This is why it's so important for them to do damage quickly, because they can't always stick around on the front line, giving you enough time to flank round and envelop them. Which brings me to my next point. Orc boys versus dwarf warriors. In a straight up fight, it's difficult for Orc boys to beat dwarf warriors. While they can generally put out more damage than dwarf warriors, they don't have the armor piercing to be able to get through that dwarf armor, so they will inevitably lose that fight. Enter Greenskin buffs. The Here We Go spell held by Great Shamans is one of the most powerful buffs going. 58 is a hell of a lot of melee attack to add on, so these Orc boys now, 84 melee attack, this gives them a very high chance of hitting their enemies, which means they're going to do more damage in a short space of time. I'm now waiting on Grimgor's War ability to unlock, and when it does, that's another 58 melee attack that actually stacks on top of the original 58, which you can see now. So 142 melee attack for these Orc boys is absolutely devastating, provided it's all applying and not being capped. With this extra damage output, the Orc boys who lack the armor piercing will be able to defeat that group of dwarf warriors. And I also did a little experiment to see if nasty skulkers who are a cheap unit with armor piercing could take down Longbeards. I found that they weren't quite able to beat them, but they did leave them with very little left in their unit. This unit, barely any health left, barely any dwarfs left, they've left them absolutely wasted. Without the melee attack buff, they definitely wouldn't have done as well. So be sure to pay attention to that ability to be able to increase the melee attack so greatly, apply it in the right places, and it can be a real game changer for the Greenskins. Like I said earlier, most lords have this ability, so it's clearly quite important. It doesn't have a massive cooldown either, so you can drop it a few times throughout the battle. Now let's talk about good old gobos. It's a common question if it's possible to field an army of goblins and actually win a battle. Are they a viable build option? Short answer, personally in my opinion, yes. Yes, it is an option. While the goblin units of course aren't the strongest in the world, they are vast in their numbers. They typically have the biggest unit sizes possible. Couple that with a lot of different poison units, poison infantry, poison missiles, poison cavalry. All that helps to bring the enemy's stats more down to their level so that they're more defeatable for goblins. You can always throw in a couple of monster units for a bit of added strength as well. You've got cheap armor piercing units and nasty skulkers and squigs. However, a big problem for goblin armies is large units. They don't really have any anti-large options. Skarsnik himself is anti-large, but that's just one lord. So missiles and spells may be the best way to deal with large for a goblin army. Overall, a goblin army can offer you a slightly different playstyle from the Greenskins, which is pretty fun and also quite comical. In the campaign, goblin units are very cheap, so fielding large armies or multiple armies is not really a problem. You are definitely going to need the numbers against factions with tougher infantry like the Chaos or the Dwarves, as goblins will probably be outdone if their numbers are matched. The footage from this battle here is a battle I played against the AI on large funds. You can see I came away with a close victory against the Empire. Kills are pretty spread out all across the board, but Made some good use of those buffs. You can see my Goblin Spearmen have all been upgraded. That's the good thing about Goblin armies, is they're smaller in price. It leaves you with a lot of money left over very often, so you can upgrade some of the units and make them more viable. But there you go, Goblin armies, pretty cool and completely doable. On with our Greenskin roster then. Lords are first up. The Night Goblin War Boss is your first option, and he is mightily cheap on foot, less than £1,000. He's primarily a crowd fighter because he is poison, so other units can take advantage of that. He doesn't have a lot of armor, but he does have quite a lot of melee defense, so again, points towards him being better than crowds than against other lords. And if you put him on his one mount, the Great Cave Squig, he does become quite formidable as he gets a huge bonus versus infantry of 40, which is absolutely massive. Most bonus versus infantry traits are around like 10 to 15, so with 40 against light infantry, he will go to work. Orc Warboss is another cheaper general. He's got pretty good melee stats all across the board, but he's not armor piercing, although he does have quite a lot of weapon strength. But he could struggle against heavily armoured lords unless you put him on his flying wyvern mount, then he does become a little bit more dangerous. Then we have the Goblin Great Shaman, who quite frankly is pretty terrible in melee, especially when fighting characters. He will go down very quick. Obviously you're mainly going to bring him for the Little War spellbook, so if you want to save some money, you don't want to bring a spellcaster and you want a really terrible melee lord, the Goblin Great Shaman might just be for you. Although you can put him on a wolf mount, which makes him a little bit better and very fast, so it can help keep him alive. Now we have the almighty Skarsnik, a very powerful goblin indeed. His stats are kind of similar to the Night Goblin War Boss. He is armor piercing though, and has a bonus versus large, which is pretty nice. He comes with his pet squig Gobbler as well, so those two together can be a nice anti-large component, which is something the Greenskins kind of lack. He's got some handy traits and of course has that poison as well, so going to be really good for bringing the enemy down to size. He also has a massive amount of health, considerably more so than even Grimgor. I'm going to assume that this is because there's two of them, there's him and Gobbler, so there's probably 2 life bars, which means together they have more life collectively. But yeah, pretty tough is Skarsnik. Now for the big man himself, Grimgor Ironhide, a personal favourite. He boasts a lot of armor, which most of the Greenskins don't, but his biggest downfall is his melee defense, only 35, which is quite low for a lord, so he does take damage fairly quickly, but where Grimgor excels is in his huge amount of melee attack and weapon strength, which is armor piercing. The WAAAAAGGGH ability for the 58 melee attack is really something that's quite crucial to Grimgor. If you pop that when he starts fighting an enemy lord, he will cut them down very quickly. Without that, he may struggle a bit because of his lower melee defense. Now to another legendary lord in Azag the Slaughterer. His melee stats aren't too bad, but even the Orc Warboss is better than him, so you'll probably want to put him on his mount Skullmuncher to make him the most dangerous. His biggest selling point though is that he comes with the Law of Death spellbook, and he's the only one in the Greenskin army that can bring that, so definitely some potential use for him. Of course, if you're facing enemies with very tough lords, you may want to use that Spirit Leech to try and bring them down to help Azag out, or of course Fate of Yuna and other spells are very useful also. But if you love a good spell, look no further than Wurzag. He is the master of spells. His first cheeky little trick is the Effigy of the Git, which is a pretty cool spell. There's not only a direct damage spell, but also nets the enemy in place, so they can't move. Very useful for making enemies vulnerable to cav charges and missiles. He also has not only the Wa ability, but the Here We Go spell as well, so he can max out everyone's melee attack. Primarily, he has the Big Wa spellbook and this cheeky little hex that boosts the miscast chance of enemy casters, which is also really nice. So as a magical magician? Yeah, he can do the best card tricks in the Badlands. However, given his lack of armor and lack of melee defense, I'm pretty sure a Bretonnian Prophetess could probably knock him out. So you may want to stick him on his board to keep him out of trouble, or have some big bosses look after him. So a nice selection of lords for the Greenskins, but a lot of them definitely need support. They can't go it solo like a lot of other stronger lords. Now onto the heroes, beginning with the Goblin Big Boss, who is a little bit of a strange one, as he is apparently a duelist, except if you look at his little description above that, it says he doesn't do too well against champions from other races. So is he good in duels or not? Whobody knows. But what we do know is that he lacks armor but does have a silver shield, so he has quite high melee defense as a result. He's lacking in the weapon strength just a little bit, maybe less than other lords and heroes in a similar role. Overall in melee combat though, his lower armor could be a real problem, especially against heroes. But where the Goblin Big Boss can make up for that is in his mounts. He can either have a wolf mount, which will make him very fast, or a spider mount, which is going to be better for bringing the enemy down to size a bit because it does have poison. So he can play a protection role well enough, but he's not the strongest horse in the stable. Yep, that made up analogy will do. Now to the Night Goblin Shaman, who is pretty atrocious in any kind of melee. He probably wants to avoid that at all cost, although he is poison. He's obviously there mainly for the Little War spellbook. Got some very useful offensive spells for buffing your line, debuffing the enemy. Might want to stick him on a mount though to try and keep him alive. And then we've got a similar deal with the Orc Shaman. Low armor, low leadership, low melee defense make him not the best candidate to go flying into the crowds. But his big WAAAAAGGGH spellbook certainly has some powerful spells in it. Foot of Gork, here we go, the one that gives 58 melee attack, and also a magic missile, great for sniping things down. So I'd say at least one of these spellcasters is essential for any Greenskins army. Which one you choose could depend on the faction you're facing, but both will be useful in many situations. Now for the Greenskins infantry. First up we've got our Goblin Spearmen. Now let me dispel a rumour first of all. While this does say in the spear infantry section that they are good against large opponents, Goblin Spearmen are not good against large. They have no bonus versus large like most other spearmen do. They also have no charge defense against large, so if they get charged into by cavalry they will get absolutely destroyed because they're so small they'll just fly around all over the place. What they do have though is a silver shield and a large unit size. These two things on a very cheap unit do kind of say that they are, as the unit card says, an expendable unit, and that is their main purpose. Great for getting in the way of charges, great for charging around and chasing after skirmishers, and just being a general annoyance. However, they do have some of the highest melee defense of any of the Greenskin infantry. If you fully upgrade them to a cost of 525, it gives them 36 melee defense. This is actually pretty good. Couple that with their shield and they can actually be a relatively okay frontline unit. Their leadership will get a nice boost as well, so compared to normal orc boys who are slightly cheaper, they do actually have a bit more survivability because of that higher melee defense. They won't output as much damage as the orc boys, but it really depends what you want from your front line. And even if you fully upgrade orc boys, they'll still get about the same amount of melee defense as the Goblin Spearmen. So some interesting things to play around with there in terms of your front line. Orc boys will be your standard choice, but Goblin Spearmen could last a bit longer if that's what you need. Now on to Night Goblins. Very similar in stats to the Goblin Spearmen, but slightly better, and their main trait is that they are poison, of course. So they're a great unit to mix in with other units, with your Orc Boys, with your Savage Orcs, with your Black Orcs. They can reduce the stats of whoever they're fighting, just to make it a bit of an easier time for that unit. And given that they only have 40 leadership, they're really not good at fighting by themselves anyway. A pretty essential thing for Goblin armies. And then you've got Night Goblin Fanatics, who are basically the same thing, except they've got their spinning loon trait, which sends one of them flying off with a ball and chain, spinning around, doing some armor piercing damage into crowds every so often. A random but potentially useful trait against heavier factions perhaps, but for the extra money, is it worth it? That's entirely up to you, my friend. Now to a mainstay of the Greenskin army, the Orc Boys. Very much your default choice for a frontline unit, very average though, similar to Empire Swordsmen or Chaos Marauders perhaps. They've got good stats all across the board, aimed more at doing damage than staying alive. So mainly a frontline unit choice, they're not really specialising in any particular area. Unlike the next unit, the Nasty Skulkers, they are a very cheap armour piercing unit, something that's hard to come by in Total War. Their terrible armour, leadership and melee defence means they won't be around very long though. However, they can drop a reasonable amount of damage in the short space they'll be around. They've got a couple of buffs and of course their Smoke Bomb, which will slow down the speed, which is going to help keep them alive against cavalries that may charge after them or anything that tries to escape them. Like any Goblin unit though, they're probably best served being mixed in with other units to avoid taking too much damage too quickly. Quite a versatile little unit, they can go on the front line, they could be flankers, they could go and run around with some cavalry to help them out. Lots of different options. Now we have a Regiment of Renown unit, the Warlords Boys. These are basically Night Goblins who have armor sundering instead of poison. Another very useful thing to take against heavily armored factions. They also have an immunity to psychology. Their stats are slightly improved over the regular Night Goblins of course, so perhaps mixed in with some other Night Goblins and Orc Boys, you can make some pretty crazy frontline concoctions. All these different cheap units give the Greenskins those options, which is what makes them very interesting to play around with. And online, it makes it hard for your opponent to figure out what you may bring. Now to our Savage Orcs, another great unit. They of course have no armor, but they do have the physical resistance. That's going to obviously help them negate a lot of damage, and they're going to need to watch out for enemies with magical attacks. They are a damage dealer unit, so very much designed to output a lot of damage very quickly, especially if you drop that WAAAAAGGGH 58 melee attack spell on them. They're going to be very dangerous, and because they are very fast on their feet at 37 speed, they're a great flanking infantry option. And then to another Regiment of Renown, the 8 Peak Loonies. These are very much the same as Night Goblin Fanatics, slightly improved stats. However, they are unbreakable, so they will not run away. That's great for trying to keep that poison on the front line at all times, until they all die of course. So potentially a very useful unit. They've got their Fanatics crazy spinning ball thing as well, so even more damage for them to potentially do. But that poison and the ability to keep it there could be very dangerous mixed with other units. Black Orcs or Crimson Killers. What a terrifying thought. Now for the Greenskins' primary anti-large unit, the Orc Biggins. These boys are one of the few infantries with an anti-large bonus. So if there's some cavalry or a monster coming your way, you're going to want to send these boys after them. Treat them the same way you would a spearman unit for any other faction. They do lack a charge defense though, so they're not great at taking charges like most spearman units are, but they are quite tough and have quite a lot of health as a result. But they will do pretty well against infantry too, especially if you drop the war spell. If you've got some tough monsters coming your way, probably best to save your war spell for these boys so they can help take them down. And then we have Savage Orc Biggins, who are basically the same thing, but just a Savage Orc variation of course. Honestly, they're not too far different from regular Biggins. They do have considerably less melee defense though, so they're going to take more damage. I'd say that normal Biggins are more defensive and survive better, while Savage Orc Biggins are more offensive and better at dealing damage, but they may die a bit quicker. So I think that kind of evens them out in terms of their usefulness, so it's really a personal preference of which you find more effective. To our final couple of units then, the Black Orcs first of all, a very dangerous elite infantry, lots of armour, lots of leadership for an orc, capable of doing a ton of armour piercing damage. However, they're quite small in the unit size and quite low on the melee defense. So much like any greenskin unit, they may not be around for a long time, but in that short space of time that they are around, they will destroy everything. A very good potential candidate for your 58 melee attack buff. Drop it on these boys at the right time and they will slice through most other infantry units with ease. They're of course going to be looking to get after anything that requires armor piercing to be taken down, as the greenskins don't have a lot of armor piercing options. And then we've got the Crimson Killers, who are fancy black orcs who dual wield axes like utter maniacs. This gives them the potential to hit more than one enemy when they swing those big bastards around. They've got an even smaller unit size than the black orcs, but they are improved in a couple of stats. A very dangerous damage dealer of a unit, and they're really going to be best because of their small unit size and low melee defense. They're going to need that war spell to really make the most of them, because they can do so much damage with the dual wielding crazy cleaving attacks. Maximizing what they can do is really going to get your money's worth for them, and they are very expensive, so you're going to want to get that. So that's all the Greenskins infantry. Like I said, they've got a lot of different options, a lot of different playstyles and front lines and flanking units they could potentially bring. Very dangerous, very unpredictable. On to the missile units then, and Goblin Archers are your first up. They are pretty horrendous in any kind of melee fight, so just don't even bother with that. They've got terrible range and terrible amount of damage, but hey, they are very cheap, so not bad if you're looking to save money. And then there's Night Goblin Archers, who are virtually the same, it's just that they have poison attacks on them. That's very useful, great for obviously bringing the stats down of any enemies that are approaching or ones that are already in combat. They do have Vanguard deployment actually, which is a nice touch, and all the Night Goblin units, even the infantry, has Vanguard deployment as well. I forgot to mention that. Then we've got our Orc Arrow boys. These are slightly better, they've got better range and better damage. They can do a little bit of fighting in melee as well, so more versatile in their uses. They're probably going to be your primary long range missile unit. And then there's Night Goblin Fanatic Archers, who you can probably figure out are basically the same as Night Goblin Fanatics, just they are archers who have poison. Very much the same as the regular Night Goblins of course, it's just they can do a little bit more melee attack damage if you so wish them to do that. Then we have our Savage Orc Arrow boys, who are, how many times am I going to have to say this, basically the same as the other Arrow boys, just their Savage Orc versions. They've got the same damage, the same range, the same missiles, they're just a little bit different in melee. I think you get the idea. Savage Orcs are a little bit faster actually, so they could potentially be a flanking missile unit. And then we've got a Regiment of Renown and the Rusty Arrows. They are of course just essentially Night Goblin Archers, but they do have armor sundering instead of poison on their missiles. They do have poison on their melee attacks, but their missiles are armor sundering. So that could be actually quite interesting if you could use that against large monsters that are heavily armored. You can bring their armor down a bit. It's going to help your anti-large to be able to bring them down. And these Night Goblin Archers, while they are considerably shorter in their range than the Orcs, they could take down a giant, for example, just as easily as Orc Arrow boys could. It's just that they have to be a little bit closer. So you can kind of use them as like maybe a personal defense force. Keep them behind your front line for close quarters action. Any large units, giants or Dragon Ogre Shagos that come along, they can just blast away at them, and it doesn't matter that they have shorter range. They're just going to do a constant amount of damage. Missile capabilities for the Greenskins. Cavalry, Cavalry, Cavalry. First up, Goblin Wolf Riders. A fantastic unit for running down enemy missiles. Very quick on their feet, not too bad in the melee, but not great. Their primary purpose is really running down missiles, and they're very cheap to do so. Then we have Forest Goblin Spider Riders. These are a bit slower than Direwolves, but they are poison and slightly better in melee, a quite high melee defense, and they do have Strider as well, so terrain is no problem for them. They're actually a melee cavalry as well, so they can charge in and stay there. Going to be best against light infantry, or maybe mixing in with your Orc Boar Boys to help them take down tougher cavalries. Then you've got a raw unit in your Moon Howlers. These are Goblin Wolf Riders who basically just cause fear and are slightly better in melee. Probably going to serve the same purpose though really, of running down skirmishers. They'll just be a little bit better at doing it due to that fear. And then we have another poison goblin concoction in the Night Goblin Squig Riders. These little fellas aren't the toughest and don't have the most damage output in the world, but they are poison and they do have a bonus versus infantry. So lighter infantries should take a fair amount of damage from these guys. They're very fast and maneuverable, so a good potential flanking cavalry. Given their immunity to psychology and their vanguard deployment, they could actually be pretty good as an ambush unit for sneaking up on the enemy and using that speed to flank round on the front line. An interesting prospect. And then there's a regiment of renown version, Dirkit Squigs. Very similar, improved stats, 15% missile resistance, really could do the same role, they're just a bit tougher than the regular ones. All these Goblin cavalry units do have a role to play in a Goblin army, so again lots of options for the Greenskins to play with. Some of these Goblin units will mix in better with Orc Boar cavalries. And the first of those is the Orc Boar Boys, a shock cavalry who are armor piercing, very nice to have that on a cheap unit again. They're obviously not the strongest in the world, you get what you pay for after all, but as a shock cavalry for charging in and pulling away, they can do a good amount of damage with that armor piercing against those heavily armored units or cavalries. They of course don't want to stay in a melee fight because of their fairly low melee defense. A good basic cavalry, but because they're so cheap, you can bring those numbers that the Greenskins really rely on. And on to the next one, we have Savage Orc Boar Boys, very similar to the regular Orc Boys, very cheap in price. Like all Savage Orc units, they're better at dealing out damage than normal Orcs at the expense of their own safety. Very low melee defense means they won't last long, but their higher damage output means that they will leave their mark. I think the Savage Orc units are best going to be used against factions that don't have a lot of armor, like the Beastmen or Bretonia, things they can do a lot of damage to quickly. Because they can't really survive a prolonged fight, things like the Dwarves or the Chaos may be a struggle for Savage Orcs. Orc Boar Boy Biggins are one of your best options for facing other cavalries as they are anti-large. Not far superior to the previous two units in terms of stats, but that anti-large bonus is going to make them the best choice for dealing with enemy cavalry. One unit alone won't be able to take down an elite cavalry like Grail Knights or Blood Knights, but they'll certainly be able to do a lot of damage. Getting them some help and some numbers though is the best way to win those engagements. An almost essential unit for any Greenskins army. Then we have something a little bit different. We've got our Orc Boar Chariot. This is very much your standard chariot. It's got a massive charge bonus, armor piercing, and a nice bonus versus infantry. So charge this thing around, try not to let it stop. It takes a lot of micromanagement, but if you can keep this thing charging around, it's very difficult to deal with and can do a lot of damage to all kinds of infantry. And then we've got our Savage Orc Boar Boy Biggins. That's quite a mouthful. Try saying that 5 times fast. Savage Orc Boar Boy Biggins, 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 Savage Orc Boar Boy Biggins. Apparently I'm pretty good at that. Who knew? Now despite being a Biggin unit, they're not actually anti-large like other Biggin units, so don't use them in the same way that you do the Orc Boar Boy Biggins, because they're not going to have that advantage against large. Light infantry, want to do lots of damage, Savage Orc Boar Boy Biggins. Lastly, the closest thing you'll get to an elite cavalry, the Broken Tusks mob are a very dangerous unit indeed. They're a fair amount better than their original unit and have 90 armor, which is a very high armor amount for a Greenskins unit. So they're going to be much better at dealing with other cavalries. They have the anti-large bonus, they're armor piercing, they've got an alright charge bonus. They're really tough, still lacking in the melee defense a little bit, but they can still hang in there, and they do cause encourage, so are going to be best used mixed in with other cavalries as well. So much like the Greenskin infantry, their cavalry has a lot of different options and a lot of different ways they could approach attacking their foe. Missile Cavalry and Goblin Wolf Rider Archers. They are pretty terrible in my experience. I've never really been able to get them to do a decent amount of damage. There is a fair amount of them in the unit. They don't have the greatest missile damage there. They've got alright range. They're very quick. An okay harassing unit, but don't expect them to do a lot. And then you've got Forest Goblin Spider Rider Archers. Another mouthful. These guys are actually not too bad because they can kind of kite the enemy with their poison. You might think you'll be able to catch them and then they'll poison you and you won't be able to catch them and they'll just be kiting the crap out of you. Potentially a useful unit there. The Goblin Wolf Chariot, perhaps a controversial unit. Is it terrible? Is it great? Whobody knows. I'd say it's kind of in between. Depends what you use it for. If you use it for missiles, terrible. If you use it like a chariot, it's very fast and very hard to catch, so it works as a charging in chariot. As for its missiles, well, it does have a lot of missile damage. It only has 6 carts, and each of those have 2 goblins in it, so that's 12 archers firing at any one time. Not doing a lot of damage there, really. Then we've got Morgrub's Mangy Marauders. These are Goblin Wolf Archers who actually aren't too shabby because they have missile damage that is armor piercing and is relatively high at 20. Well, not high, but okay, average, good, fair to good, nice. A possible harasser of heavier factions. And then another raw unit, Death Creepers. These are Forest Goblin Spider Rider Archers with most notably regeneration. They also have Stalk as well, so they're going to be a great ambushing unit, still got that poison. Could be a good one to sneak up alongside your main Orc cavalries and they can be a surprise ambush unit with that poison to help your Orc Boar Boy Biggins or whoever win their engagements. And lastly in the Missile Cav section we've got Teeth Robbers who are a Goblin Wolf Chariot with more missile damage than the normal version, but mostly are very much the same. They do have Vanguard deployment as well. Both these units as well actually have a bonus versus infantry, which again suggests they're better fighting infantry physically rather than just shooting missiles, but they kind of can do either. But like I said, the missile damage isn't great, but I'm sure somehow they could be useful. Monsters and beasts then, and squigs are the first up. Everyone loves a good squig. Who doesn't love a good squig? I know you love a good squig. Comment me, telling me how much you love squig. Actually, someone try and draw me a squig in the comments. That'll be interesting. Squigs, very good for dealing with elite units. They are not only armor piercing, but also have a bonus versus infantry. So really, they're just purely designed for destroying heavy armor. And they're very cheap. Another great cheap armor piercing option. Great swords, chosen, foot squires, any dwarf. Squigs love munching them down. And then in a similar fashion, you've got trolls who are armor piercing. A nice amount of armor piercing damage on them as well. They do have regeneration too, which helps their survivability overall, but mainly they will run away a lot because of their low leadership. That fear is going to help them get rid of enemies quicker though. Much like squigs, they are destroyers of elite heavily armoured troops. And then there's your giant. Everybody knows about giants. They pretty much destroy everything apart from anti-large units. They need to watch out for those. Need to be careful of missiles as well, but overall any infantry is in trouble from a giant. And then you've got your Arachnarok, who is an interesting piece of spider indeed. Pretty dangerous damage output from this thing, lots of weapon strength, it's got a lot of mass so it can charge through enemy front lines, lots of armor, does poison attacks, it has missiles on the back, it causes terror, it really does it all. Just be careful of anti-large and missiles of course. And then you've got your variation of the Arachnarok spider, you've got the Arachnarok Queen. She's got a bit more staying power with improved stats over the normal Arachnarok. She can also spawn spiderlings which you can send after your enemies, very useful for disrupting skirmishers and things. Both are going to be used in a similar fashion. Fantastic for charging around and trying to cause terror on those low leadership units all over the place and getting them off the battlefield quick. Expensive, but very powerful. So a variety of different monsters there, great for accenting your Greenskin army. And last of all, the Greenskins have it all. They've got artillery too. Goblin Rock Lobber, very good cheap artillery, decent range, decent damage that is armor piercing. Definitely useful if you want to play a more tactical, slower paced game. Because it's so cheap, it's not going to have a big impact on your army, so bringing one along isn't really a big deal. It can potentially do you a good amount of damage and not disrupt the main build of your army too much. Then you've got the Hammer of Gork, which is a regiment of renown with some slight improved damage over the normal Rock Lobber. And it does have the Great Green Wallop, which reduces your enemy's melee attack, melee defense and accuracy. Because of the accuracy, I assume it's meant to be used more on skirmishers, but honestly the melee attack and melee defense is only going to be useful if they're engaged in fighting someone, but then you run the risk of friendly fire, so where is it really going to be useful? And last but by no means least, we have the Doom Diver Catapult. The most powerful artillery for the Greenskins, and of course it is a little bit more expensive. You can take control of it yourself and guide the divers to their doom, making it a little bit more effective as you will be more accurate, unless you suck. But artillery can potentially play a role in the Greenskins army and do a fair amount of damage for them. So hopefully from this you can see the variety in the Greenskins roster and all the potential cocktails of units that they could throw together to make different army builds. Let's finish strong on an example battle then. I brought my Greenskins and boy have I brought a lot of them against the Wood Elves. I'm charging up on them now. They've got their spearmen, their front line coming at me. You can see the magnitude of my army compared to the size of theirs. I outnumber them vastly. The same amount of money has been spent on both armies of course. They're dropping some Flock of Doom on my Orc Boys and my Night Goblins coming up here. My front lines are engaging. I'm going to drop the Here We Go spell from the Orc Great Shaman. This is going to help these boys out because they are facing 3 units here. They should have some nice melee attack now. 84 melee attack for them. That'll help them get through that front line and hopefully survive the onslaught of 3 units of Eternal Guard because they are very dangerous. You can see we're doing a lot of damage here. So our front line starting off strong. Got a little bit more going on over here. Durthu is coming after my Great Shaman. He does not want anything to do with him. Right, he says he's off skis. Sending my Black Orcs after Durthu because they've got the armor piercings to deal with him. We've beaten down some Wild Riders on this side with my Orc Boys and some big uns. On the left side I've got a heavy flanking force. The Elves simply don't have enough units to stop me here. I've just been able to walk around with all these units. Got some Goblin Spearmen here just chasing after these skirmishers, just trying to keep them from the fight. They're probably not going to catch them, but if they can keep them from firing on my army, we can kill the rest of the army before they're able to get back to the fight. Got my missiles firing on Durthu now, trying to bring him down. Black Orcs, doing an alright job with him. My big uns are busy elsewhere, so I'll try and get the big uns on him as soon as possible. Got some Orc Boys here that I pulled back. Grimgore's just been smashing over some Elves. These Elves are completely surrounded in the middle here. They are in deep trouble. And so hopefully you can see from all this, we've got some Cavalry coming in here. Getting a nice big charge on the back of these Spearmen. Just starting to wave my orc boys there as well. Don't want to leave them too long there, because they are spearmen, they are fighting. But yeah, you can see I've just completely overwhelmed these elves. I haven't really had to do much tactically. And that's one of the things with the Greenskins. You don't actually have to be that tactical. You've got to look at your matchups and stuff, of course. But honestly, as much as I hate to say it, because I'm all about being tactical and playing Total War properly, they are a faction that can kind of be played without too much thought. You can just overrun your opponent with numbers, flank the crap out of them, and you'll probably be able to win it. But I guess that's just very characteristic of the Greenskins, to be able to win on brute force alone. That said though, you can still get pretty tactical with them if you want to, given their large variety of units. So, many different ways to play the Greenskins, one of my personal favourite factions to play. Is he gone? He better be gone. If he comes back, you're answering the door. I've got to do this outro, shut up. So there you go, your guide to the Greenskin Army. I hope you found this useful and I hope this improves your Greenskin game. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the future.